First off, to provide some context for this group as authors, who are you when you're not being authors? What is your background, and how did or didn't it prepare you to write these books? I know I just did the lengthy bios, but if you can kind of give the how did you get here version of the story, that'd be great. Michelle, kick us off.
Well, my background, of course, is I was in the Air Force and an engineer in aerospace industry, but always wanted to be an author, so that's always been my first love. I love writing. I'm also a photographer, and that keeps me quite busy too, at least when it's safe to go outside. I'd say right now my big passion is associated directly with the X-15. I've been having a great time talking about that. I go all over the place, again, when it's possible, to do my talks on the X-15 and to just pass on the legacy to other people as much as I can. So that has been my passion for the last several years since the book came out. So I'd say that's my number one job is working in that realm.
All right, Francis.
Yes, a good question, isn't it? I see Colin has joined us, thankfully. I really don't remember a time I wasn't into all this kind of stuff. It's one of those things that has always fascinated me. I think the human stories have always been more fascinating than the technical stories to me. But I don't know, I'm sure in this group particularly, there's a lot of people who read books where the human stories are great, but the technical just is wrong, and it just annoys you. If you see there's one thing wrong in a book, it's going to make you doubt the whole book. So while I really enjoy doing the human stories, I really enjoy working with the people in this group, both the authors and the many engineers who are watching, to try and get that technical stuff correct. I think that's where I sort of came into it. Is I love human stories about everything, not just space, but this is the only time in history that people are doing this stuff for the very first time, and that's what really got me engaged.
All right, thank you. Jay?
Well, my background is not in writing, but it's close. It's in filmmaking. So my degree is actually in broadcasting and film production. Went to school to learn how to make movies and worked for about 15 years as a professional film editor, doing a lot of commercials and corporate video and documentaries and little movies, the kind that you would see at 2 o'clock in the morning on Showtime, stuff like that. But just always was kind of a closet writer, definitely always a closet space geek, and was in the process of sort of developing my own little writing projects, be it a short story or a screenplay or something like that. And so that's kind of the world that I was in at the time that the book series came along.
All right, and John?
Thanks, David. As you mentioned in your introduction there, I grew up in the DC area, always around the museums, seeing the actual spacecraft and the hardware when I was a kid from the 1970s on. And that kind of fueled my desire to get into aviation myself. But then even throughout the aviation career, while you're studying all the hard technical things you need to do to be successful in that, I still spent all my free time reading things about spaceflight history. So the two, to me, always kind of went together hand in hand. Very, very fortunate around 2008 to get involved in this series and finally have a use for all the knowledge that I had stored away in my brain that I was wondering what I was going to do with one day. But it's been very rewarding. So.
All right, thank you. And Colin, do we have you here now?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Oh, brilliant. Yes, wonderful.
Little technical problem at this end, but I'm fine. So repeat the question, David.
The question was kind of, who are you when you're not being an author? What was your road that led you to this path?
Oh, goodness me, a long path. But initially, the flight of John Glenn back in 1962 is what spurred my imagination and enthusiasm for studying spaceflight history. Prior to that, a poor scholastic record, nothing much to indicate what lay ahead for me. But there was enthusiasm, and I enjoyed writing short stories. And eventually this interest in spaceflight history and writing came together as the basis for the Outward Odyssey series.
All right, thank you. And for myself, I started in high school. I had dreams of being an aerospace engineer. In, I want to say, 10th grade, I was unfortunately a little more interested in the girl sitting in front of me than in Algebra 2, and accidentally became a journalist instead. Thought that I had to make the decision between doing this this writing thing, this communications thing, or doing the whole space or NASA thing, and chose the writing communications route. Became a majored in journalism. Worked in newspapers for several years out of college before discovering that that there actually are people who write about space. That this thing that I had spent years believing was an either or, turns out could be an and. So that was the path that led me towards where I am.